All-American is back inside Studio A as Week 4 is upon us, and the first month of college football and the academic school year are starting to come to an end. Alongside Morgan Uber, I'm Kyle Youmans, delighted to be back with you to talk about the American Athletic Conference this week and all of the happenings inside of it. We have maybe a true contender for the college football playoffs starting to emerge. Lots of opportunities on a national stand to see these teams either succeed or maybe benchmark where they are throughout their year. But Morgan, it's another week down, and week 3 was an up and down week for the American. There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I would say it's also it can't even be an up and down week for us, Kyle. It was just sort of a down week for us because I have to start off with our picks from last week. Neither of them went our way. Unfortunately, Texas Tech taking care of business over North Texas, Kyle's pick, and my pick with the Oklahoma Sooners taking down Tulane, which I got plenty of flack for on social media. But I do want to let you know that you and Reese Davis have something in common. He also picked your alma mater, North Texas, to take care of business as his super dog on College game day. So there you go. You and Reese Davis also sharing in that agony together.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. And he even tweeted out in the middle of the game because 52 points put up by Texas Tech in the first half wasn't pretty. And he said maybe North Texas should change their nickname from the mean green to the polite green. I'm not here for it, Reese. I'm sticking with North Texas all the way through. However, it wasn't a great showing for them. They weren't alone. It was a weird week in college football across the board. These top teams at the top of the AP poll right now are taking care of business, and they did so in week 3. The American just happened to be in the way of a couple of those, and I think it was an opportunity. I mentioned a benchmarking opportunity for these programs, this conference. They had a lot of games against power programs in big-time atmospheres across the way. Won a couple of them, but fell in a bunch of them as well. There were a lot of things that we learned about where these teams stand going into week 4 of the college football season, and it's something that I think we can all learn from, including the players and the coaches themselves.
We'll, of course, be diving into the Memphis matchup, the big win going into Tallahassee, getting that win over a preseason top 10 team, Florida State. But a team that was able to respond, right? That's what it's all about. And a lot of teams will have that opportunity to do that here again in week 4. But week 3, the South Florida Bulls, a nice response coming off of what they did, going into Alabama, not exactly able to get things done. Had a nice showing, but took care of business. They caged those Golden Eagles. And won 49-24. The offense got rolling, and man, do they have a big one this week. And we're really excited to welcome in our analyst Patrick Murray. He was on the call for week 1 for the South Florida Bulls. Got to see them up close and in person. Patrick, great to be here with you. Appreciate you joining us. And from what you've seen from South Florida so far this season, Kyle mentions that word benchmark. Where would you benchmark where this team is at right now?
I'd say that they're close to being a contender. We saw how close they were with Alabama. It was 21-16 tied with 6 minutes left in that game. They were right there, and then it kind of fell apart for South Florida over those final 6 minutes in Tuscaloosa. But they bounced back, get the big win over Southern Miss. The offense looked a lot more explosive. And now these next 3 games are huge for the Bulls season. I mean, taking on Miami, Tulane, and Memphis, it's going to decide whether they're going to be a contender for the American Conference Championship and the college football playoff or not.
I want to pose a question for both of you, Patrick and Kyle. Kyle, I'll start with you first. Okay. Patrick, you mentioned that offense. Just, what you saw specifically from South Florida in that Southern Miss game where they looked different. Byron Brown looked different. He looked like himself again after that Alabama game where things were a little bit rough. But what did you notice? What stood out?
Well, I think at times whenever you're a quarterback, you are who you are, right? You are from a skill set standpoint. You end up being who you are. And he was trying to mold himself into being a pocket passer. He talked about it in the offseason during media days. He wants to be better in the pocket and throwing the ball intermediate to deep routes downfield. And he tried that a couple times in the early parts of the season against Bethune-Cookman, against Alabama, as Patrick alluded to a little bit earlier. But when you get back to the read option game, that's what Byron Brown is built for. He's so good in the red zone. He's so good at making those reads. He is so elusive and athletic whenever it comes to carrying the football. And I think it opens things up for the rest of that backfield. I'm interested to see, Patrick, how you feel it. But I think when they are running that read option effectively, they get the RPO game going, and they're able to make reads and allow for Byron Brown to be who he is and who he's built to be as a quarterback and as an effective passer, I think it does completely open up the offense.
Patrick, I mean,
it really was. Yeah. I'm sorry, Morgan, to
go
jump
ahead.
on the air, but yeah, it really was the run game that got things going for South Florida. I mean, they're going to need that vertical passing game at some point, especially against Miami. But they just ran all over Southern Miss, and it wasn't just Brown. It was the running backs and Kelly Joyner and Naquan Wright, and the offensive line did a great job, especially R.J. Perry at left tackle and Mike Lofton at center. And they were doing some things with their scheme on the offensive line, pulling linemen, inserting tight ends, and Southern Miss had a hard time adjusting to that and fitting it up at times. And we saw some huge holes in the run game, and that's where a lot of the explosive plays came from for the Bulls.
Yeah, give credit to that offensive line. I mean, they threw them some different looks, different packages. Southern Miss didn't keep the same look all the way through this game, Morgan. Whenever they came to a defensive front seven, they were blitzing off the edge at times. They would drop back in coverage with their linebackers and other occasions. And the offensive line, it didn't matter. They were finding their way up to the second level. Those pulling guards were having some success. South Florida's big up front. They've got some size. We'll talk about that and how it matches up with Miami a little bit later on. But that size played a big factor. It opened up Kelly Joyner, 10 carries, 117 yards, couple touchdowns. Naquan Wright was tremendous, 15 carries, up over 100 yards as well. He had a touchdown too. And when that running game is going the way that it can, it opens things up like this, and having Josh Hardiman in the back of the end zone with a highlight reel grab. That was the difference, that balanced attack, and it all starts whenever Byron Brown is comfortable, and he's comfortable whenever that read option is working in their favor.
Yeah, you guys both have mentioned Kelly Joyner, his 6th year of college football. This guy has seen everything. Yeah. He's been through everything, suffered a broken right leg, a broken left foot. If you give him space, he can hurt you. And he said he came back for that unfinished business, didn't want to move on to his next chapter yet. And really a big part of this South Florida Bulls offense that we saw just explode. 6 different players with a TD, 562 yards of total offense. So now they head into a big game this week against Miami. And Patrick, you're down there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm sure you're hearing all the talk about how the U is back. It's Miami's year. They're in contention now, not just for an ACC title, but for a national championship title. What does this game come down to in your eyes? What is the X factor on Saturday?
Yeah, I can't get away from that Canes talk down here. It's all over the place. They are pumped up, and I'm getting tired of it. But it's going to be really fun this weekend to see South Florida take on Miami. I mean, the Canes are so explosive offensively with Cam Ward, who's the Heisman frontrunner right now. He's the favorite to win the Heisman, leads the nation with 11 passing touchdowns. The defense has been really good for Miami as well. Tyler Barron is second in the country with 4.5 sacks. But South Florida can give them some problems. I mean, the Bulls are built to pull upsets like this with the aggressiveness that they play with offensively and defensively, and their schemes are hard to prepare for. I mean, their tempo and their spacing offensively, that's hard to prepare for. Todd Orlando, the defensive coordinator for South Florida, all the different pressure packages that he brings, that's really hard to prepare for. And so some of the keys for the Bulls this weekend are going to be get pressure on Cam Ward. And South Florida leads the country in pressure percentage and pressuring the quarterback. And when you look at Cam Ward, when he's kept clean in a clean pocket, he has an 80% completion percentage. That drops down to 50% when he's under pressure. So South Florida is going to have to get pressure on Cam Ward, and they're going to need Byron Brown to hit on a couple of those big plays down the field. He's only 1 for 9 throwing it 20-plus yards down the field so far this year, but they have been really close. I mean, against Alabama, Michael Brown-Stevens, some of the receivers for South Florida, they were beating those Alabama corners deep and getting open, and Brown was just inches away from hitting them on those deep balls. They're going to have to hit on a couple of those to beat the Canes.
Yeah, Patrick, you bring up some really good points about the trenches and just being able to protect Byron Brown and also get to Cam Ward. So, Kyle, I'm curious from your perspective, what do you see when you look at these offensive and defensive lines and how they match up against each other?
Well, usually whenever you are at least an underdog like South Florida is in a game like this, you got to keep it simple, right? And by this point in time, you look at the tape, you look at the first couple games for both of these teams, and South Florida has some size. I mentioned that earlier. Miami, it's all about the speed, but if you match up size-wise, you can out-physical this Miami team in the trenches. I mean, Miami's offensive line, 311 pounds compared to USF 317. So South Florida gives the advantage in terms of size on average on that offensive line. 295 pounds for the Miami or for the USF defensive line compared to Miami's, which is 275. So USF is 20 pounds heavier on their defensive line than Miami is. What that tells me is that they have to be careful outside the tackles. They have to be careful with that speed. You mentioned Cam Ward. He is dynamic as a dual-threat quarterback. He is the Heisman frontrunner for a reason. But if you can keep those linebackers in their alignment, their assignment, their gap integrity, and able to get those guys forward and keep their eyes from getting locked in the backfield from Cam Ward and allowing for the intermediate to short passing game to continue to give that yards after the catch ability, I think South Florida can have some success. But it's the speed of Miami that I think is going to be the toughest matchup. And Patrick, I'm interested to see what you think in the same way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the offensive tackles for South Florida are going to have big games. Yeah. R.J. Perry on the left side, Derek Bowman on the right side, slowing down the speed from Miami that you mentioned, especially Tyler Barron. Yeah. Ruben Bain, another really high-level pass rusher for Miami, hasn't played but just 3 snaps this year, dealing with an injury. Not sure if he will play this week, but the tackles for South Florida offensively are going to have to deal with that speed. And South Florida has a lot of depth on the defensive line that they can rotate in to try to get after the passer. And it's not just the D line for the Bulls. Todd Orlando's bringing pressure from all over the places, all over the place. It's Kawan Banks at nickel. It's the safeties. It's Mac Harris at linebacker. He's going to find different ways to bring pressure.
And Todd Orlando's seen it before. I mean, his time at USC, he's faced powerful speed opponents. Same thing at Texas, Houston, Utah State. I mean, he's been a defensive coordinator in this league for so long. By this point, he's seen a little bit of everything. And the good thing for South Florida is they've seen speed like this already. You mentioned that Alabama matchup. Miami's speed doesn't differ much from what the Crimson Tide showed defensively, and offensively at that same level. So Todd Orlando's got a tough task ahead of him. That South Florida offense has a tough task ahead of them, but they haven't seen it, or it's nothing they haven't seen already, and it's going to be something they'll keep an eye on going into the week.
Just such a gauntlet of a schedule that South Florida has had to go through. I mean, but, one thing that I'm really excited to see is the environment that is going to be created there for this weekend. You think about record-shattering student demand for tickets, and that was, numbers as of Sunday already surpassing the previous record, which South Florida had when they played the University of Florida back in 2001 when they were number 13 in the country.
They opened up the second deck at Raymond James Stadium. I mean, they've opened it up all the way through to just let more fans in the building.
And that's what we anticipate happening here this weekend.
Yeah. That's what they are going to do.
Yep.
That's what they are opening it up, and those tickets are available. So it's a big matchup and a lot of excitement down in South Florida for sure.
Well, another exciting matchup that happened last weekend in the state of Florida, the Memphis Tigers having to go on the road to face a then top 10 preseason ranked team, Florida State. They were 0-2, not the start that they expected to have, but the Memphis Tigers still going and taking care of business against a team that was picked to win the ACC conference. And boy, they got the job done and some. Did they look good or what? And I still think, regardless of the fact, Mike Norvell is the reigning coach of the year, regardless of what they have done so far. It was very impressive to see what Memphis did. And Patrick, as you watched the game on Saturday, you've covered Seth Henigan now for years. What stood out about the way that he was able to command and control this offense in that environment?
And going through the film of that game, I was really impressed with the ball placement from Seth Henigan. There were some tight windows. Florida State played a lot of man coverage. They played some good tight coverage, and he fit some balls in there and put them in places where only his receiver could get to it and the defender could not get to it. So that accuracy and that ball placement from Henigan was really key in that game. And also he kept the ball out of harm's way. Henigan knew when to hit the check down, when to throw it away. He didn't throw really but maybe one dangerous pass that could have turned into a turnover, and that was really key in such a tight game like that to come out with the win.
And that's why he was named the American Offensive Player of the Week, and he was so efficient all the way through. We talked about this a little bit last week going into the game. Of course, Memphis was on the edge of getting into the AP Top 25. They're still one position out of that right now, receiving votes, but right on the edge. I mean, a win like this probably doesn't hold as much weight as it would have initially. Yes, it's important to go in and win on the road. It's tough to do that against any power opponent, especially with the atmosphere that they face down in Tallahassee. But with a win like this, what does it tell you about this Memphis ball club and how much they've improved over these last couple of years and how much leadership they do have to work with in that Tigers front office and in that Tigers organization?
A couple of things stand out. One, I think the defense stepping up and the way that they played to hold Florida State to 238 total yards, and a defense that really held Memphis back last year. And the second thing is just going and winning a big game against a big opponent, right? I mean, Memphis goes 10-3 last year. They lose to Missouri, Tulane, and SMU, the top two teams in the American. And then, of course, Missouri, a great team out of the SEC. So being able to go and play in one of those big games against a huge opponent and come out with the victory, especially on the road, that's certainly a step forward for that Tigers program.
I think it's so funny. Over the years, talking with head coach Ryan Silverfield, if you talk with any coach, I think he gives you normally the most coach speak, and he would be the first to tell you that. That is just his personality. That's how he goes about his business. But post-game, listening to his press conference, when he called that win monumental for the program, and it actually acknowledged the fact of how much significance going up against his former mentor, right? I mean, Mike Norvell, they stood, next to each other for 4 years working at Memphis together, sharing that sideline, and then to go into his house, right, and be able to take care of business. And Patrick, you talked about the defense and what Chandler Martin, he earns my MVP for that game and what he did. He told Seth Henigan going into this season, I'm sorry for being bad on defense last year. You won't have to put up as many points as last year. We're going to be better. And boy, was he a man of his word. The way he started that game, coming with the takeaway to set the tone on, the first drive for Florida State. I think right then and there, he was the difference maker in the game. You look at his stats, 8 tackles, 2.5 for loss. And this is a young man who he graduated from high school when he was just 16 years old. He doesn't put limits on himself, and he was playing fearless out there on Saturday. I think the defense, to me, was the story of the game. And if they can continue to play the way that they did on Saturday, Memphis is going to go undefeated this season. There's no question in my mind.
Yeah, and that doesn't change the way that we view this Memphis team except for positively, right? We've talked about the offense. We had Mario Anderson Jr. on the show last week. We may have another Memphis Tiger coming up later in the show, a little tease later on in the show. But the offense has always been there, right? But the defense, the way that they've stepped up, Patrick, I think is what's going to ultimately propel this team to the ceiling that they want to reach, to where they want to go, getting to the college football playoff, continuing to challenge these power of opponents like a Florida State and a team that was trying to get into the 4-team college football playoff last year. That defense is really going to be what takes them to the next level.
Definitely. It has to be the defense. I mean, that's what we were talking about in the offseason with Memphis. It's like, well, the offense is really good. They're bringing back Seth Henigan and his top 2 weapons. We know the offense is going to be good. Can the defense take a step? And that's going to be the difference of if they can win the conference title or at least contend for it. And it certainly seems to be much improved, especially the linebacking core with Chandler Martin back, bringing in Elijah Herring from Tennessee. The corners for Memphis are playing like the top corner combo in the conference so far through 3 games. And that is huge for Memphis moving forward and being able to compete for this conference championship.
It's kind of along those same lines. It's unfortunate the way that this game was preceded on one end of the bargain. Florida State didn't hold up their end of the bargain by winning their games early on. If Florida State's still inside the top 10 or even top 15, let's say they're 1-1, right? And they're in at least the top 20 conversation, top 25. Memphis, who was receiving votes going into the week, is not still receiving votes. They are squarely in the top 25, depending on how Florida State is. They would maybe be a top 20 team, top 15 team, based on what happened in this week. But sure enough, Florida State started 0-2. They're now 0-3, so it doesn't have that same weight of a win. But in terms of some of these different programs, these different conferences, do you still feel like Memphis is still in the driver's seat whenever it comes to the college football playoff and some of these other teams that are going to possibly challenge the Tigers to get there?
I think they're for sure still in the driver's seat. I mean, they're sitting there undefeated. If Memphis runs the table and goes undefeated, I think they get the spot. They get the spot in the college football playoff. If they lose a game in there, then, there's probably going to be a discussion, whether it's UNLV or Boise State or Northern Illinois or Liberty, or, we're probably going to end up having some arguments about who deserves that spot in the college football playoff. But right now, I'd say it's Memphis's to lose.
Can we argue about it right now?
Well, yeah, I do have a debate. I know this is an American show, and I will say, I do think when you watch the film, right, NIU is the team that's going to come up.
Probably, yeah.
But when you watch the film, I do agree, the eye test, Memphis will tell you they're the better team. But
Agreed.
at the end of the day, NIU is going to have the best win of the season should they go undefeated if that all, is said and done.
And Patrick brings up UNLV. They have 2 Big 12 wins already. They defeated
but
Houston.
How good is Kansas? I mean,
completely agree. I think Kansas is probably the bigger win out of those 2 teams completely. Kansas is not the Kansas of the past. Houston is not the Houston of the past in the opposite way. Like they beat Houston week 1. That's a win that I think you can kind of put in the back shoulder more so as a reputation win more than anything. Kansas is a legitimate team with some legitimate speed and firepower, and they won that game far and away. I mean, they controlled that game overall. But Patrick, I mean, I'm looking at NIU. I'm looking at UNLV. Of course, Liberty, just because of what they did last year, squeaking into a New Year's Six Bowl, going out of Conference USA and playing against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. They're still undefeated. If they run the table too, I think they'll be in that conversation with a one-loss Memphis team. But anybody else that kind of sticks out in terms of those teams that even have an opportunity to challenge the Tigers to this point?
Boise State in the Mountain West, I think could certainly be one, and a fantastic running back there in Ashton Jeanty, who could be a Heisman candidate. But I think if you look at Memphis, if they were to go through undefeated, they would have beaten South Florida and they would have beaten Tulane as well. And I think if it comes down to Memphis and NIU both being undefeated, that's going to be a tough conversation because of NIU's win over Notre Dame. But I think winning the American is certainly going to be tougher than winning the MAC. And it's going to be tougher than winning Conference USA when it comes to Liberty as well. So if it comes down to that strength of schedule, I think Memphis is going to end up being on top.
Yeah, Patrick, you bring up strength of schedule. I had the opportunity last week to do the mock CFP selection committee. And let me tell you, that strength of schedule, when, the numbers and information that the committee has to look at, it is fascinating, by the way. I could do a whole, 2-hour podcast on just everything I went through.
You've got time.
Yeah. But the strength of schedule piece is a huge separator. So I think, when you think about how the Americans scheduled this year, it was really smart that they scheduled, Memphis, South Florida, Tulane, having the opportunity to play each other, because it does help. I mean, if there's a situation like we had last year where you have, a Liberty and an SMU that they were weighing, I mean, those strength of schedules, they were only off by 10 to 12 teams, not that much, and Liberty was the lower of the two, but because they went undefeated, that's where they got the edge. But if you're looking at 2 teams completely undefeated and a strength of schedule that's, much significantly higher, it's going to be very obvious to the committee when they're looking at the same numbers that I had the opportunity to look at last week. So I do think that is a huge advantage that Memphis will have at the end of the season, when we're all sitting around waiting, who's going to get that 12th spot in the college football playoff. So exciting that we're finally at 12.
It should be fun.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, whenever
awesome to get to talk about it.
Yeah, it just provides for more debate, right? It provides for more intrigue, and it keeps teams involved. It keeps teams and fan bases and conferences involved all the way through. I love the 12-team playoff. Speaking of strength of schedule, they've got a fun one this week against Navy. I mean, Navy 2-0 at this point, as is every, I guess, a military academy in the American, because Army also 2-0. But Navy, are they going to put Memphis on a little bit of upset alert here, Patrick? What do you see from the midshipmen and how they're going to challenge this Memphis team coming up on Saturday?
Navy is always tough. They're so hard to prepare for because of their offense, and they have a slightly different offense this year, running the wing tee, and you'll get that triple option, and it's something that you don't see in any other game, and you have to specifically prepare for it. And Navy's defense is always tough under Brian Newberry, and they, similar to South Florida, will bring all sorts of different blitzes and pressures, so they can catch you. That can be a trap game for some teams, and having some trouble prepping for Navy, but I think Memphis is on a mission and they're going to be ready to go.
And Seth Henigan has had success against Navy in his time as a Memphis Tiger, so we will see, and really looking forward to that one. Patrick, we appreciate your time, knowledge, and expertise as always, and enjoy your college football Saturday wherever you'll be watching from.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Loved it.
Patrick's the GOAT. He's
awesome.
Got it all taken care of.
And the fact he's down there right in the heart of wherever.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest games, getting to hear all the Miami talk and South Florida.
That was my favorite part of that entire interview, when he said, I'm sick of it.
Right.
He said, I am done with this Miami talk. I want to see somebody challenge that. South Florida, again, I said it 2 weeks ago when they took on Alabama. They have a shot. They really do. The physicality is there. They have an opportunity to try and push the U. Miami's speed is unmatched. They're elite speed level-wise, and that's a reason why they are considered a national championship contender. So was Alabama. And South Florida kept Alabama at bay all the way up until that final quarter. They have to do something similar, but they got to finish this time. And luckily, they're at home. They're not playing in Tuscaloosa. They're not playing in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium. They're playing at home in the friendly confines with an extra deck full of people and students and tickets and everything. South Florida's got an opportunity. They just have to take advantage.
And I think it's huge that they're going to have that Alabama game to look back on that experience of we played a team 3.5 quarters really tight on the road too, So I think Alex Golesh to have that, and also for those players to just have that experience to lean back on, that confidence piece, I think that is going to really maybe be a huge factor in them being able to have success. Speaking
of a team that had an opportunity to knock off a top 20 opponent, and had another opportunity to knock off a top 20 opponent. How about the Tulane Green Wave? Well, it was an unfortunate ending. Really, it was an unfortunate beginning in Norman against the Oklahoma Sooners, Morgan, because they were playing number 15 Oklahoma on the road, and the Sooners jumped out on top early, but Tulane made a charge late. What did you see from that matchup?
Well, I think, there's no moral victories in college football, but the fact they were down 21-0 on the road, you have to love the fight and determination that you saw from Tulane in this second half. It's too bad that they couldn't have played the same way that they played in the third and fourth quarter earlier in that game. The Sooners offense, I think they came up with some crucial third down conversions, including a couple of Arnold rushes. They were over 50% on third down after going 5 of 26 in their first 2 games. And there was one, I think it was 3rd and 11, where Jackson Arnold, just takes it, and to me, that was a breakdown in the Sooners' defense of just not being able to contain him. And then on the other side of it, for Tulane, they weren't able to establish the run. I mean, Mekhi Hughes, he had such a big season last year, and I think maybe it's these defenses, right, that he's seen these past couple weeks between K-State and Oklahoma. But for him, held to just 71 yards, that was a little bit disappointing, and I think that was maybe an X factor to the fact that they couldn't get things done there in Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think the way that they responded in the second half of that game tells me a lot about the makeup of the Green Wave. I think the way that they played better as the game went along. Of course, you had the pick 6 late that gave them an opportunity to go within 1 score. They had the football with a chance to drive and take the lead, and an unfortunate mistake from Darian Mensah, another late interception. He threw into double coverage, gets tipped, batted around. Billy Bowman Jr. ends up with the interception, and that's really the decider in the ball game. But they were more physical, or just as physical as Oklahoma was in that second half. The speed flashed from Oklahoma, and I thought the coaching staff from Tulane, I give a lot of credit to the Tulane staff and what they were able to do to try and combat some of that speed defensively, especially. I really liked what Tyler Polk and Greg Gasparotto, apologies if I said the name wrong in terms of the defensive coordinators, the code DCs there. I thought they did a great job of silencing the Sooners in the second half to give their opportunity, give a chance to win that football game. It was, if you don't start 21 points down, you end up winning that game.
Oh, absolutely. No question.
Because of the way that they played. That makes me think that they are a quality football team inside the American, and that is also on the back end of what they did against Kansas State, too. It's almost the opposite game. They started off hot, had a lead early against Kansas State, squandered it late. Oklahoma squandered it early, and they figured it out as they went along and played better than the Sooners did in that second half against a crowd like that in Norman, like they were. I came out of that game really impressed with the way that Tulane played against Oklahoma, and I think it's something that they can use going up against Louisiana this week.
And I think another thing that they can use is looking at John Summerall's history,
Sure.
right? When he was at Troy, the past 2 seasons, they went 1-2 to start the year, and then they were able to respond. The teams finished 12-2 and 11-2 respectively. So, look, he's been here before. He knows how to get a team rolling and get on a hot streak. So, again, I think it's similar to a team like South Florida where they can look at, okay, look, we went on the road playing a quality opponent. We were right there with them. And again, I go back to what I said right off the top. No such thing as a moral victory in college football, but there is something that you can learn in a confidence piece that you can take with you throughout the rest of the season now as they get into conference play, and they still have opportunities Tulane pretty lucky, right? They get to host South Florida and Memphis. So when you think about that home field environment, how close they were against Kansas State, really a game that came down to the absolute wire. I mean, how lucky for them to get both of those teams at home rather than having to go on the road.
Yeah, and that's a great place to play in Youmans Stadium and what they do there. 1-2 doesn't look good. The record doesn't look good, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on how it relates to the rest of the conference that's trying to get back on the right track after a tough week as a league. But it's a whole lot better wwhenever those 2 losses are things that you can learn from. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the history of John Summerall and what they did at Troy, winning some Sun Belt titles, starting 1-2, doesn't matter. You still right the ship. You end up with double-digit wins, and all is well at the end of the day. That can still be the story for this Tulane team. They have an opportunity to run the table, to be a contender in the American, a contender to try and work their way into the college football playoff. It'll be a little bit tougher with 2 losses, and we just talked about Memphis and their 1 loss and how that could affect them. 2 losses for Tulane, but 2 quality losses against power opponents like Oklahoma and Kansas State. As long as you learn from them and you don't let those teams beat you up down the road by either being banged up and injured or from thinking back and getting in your head and having your confidence level shot from those 2 games, I think Tulane's a legitimate contender in this conference, and they'll show it this week against the Louisiana team that comes in at 2-0. They're riding high, but they haven't played anybody. Let's be real.
Yeah, I mean, wins over Grambling State and Kennesaw State. Yeah. So when you look at their numbers, sure, they're ranked 10th nationally in total defense. They do have a new DC in Jim Salgado, has had time in the NFL, most recently came from Michigan State. So I think their defense is good, but we'll see if they're really great against what this Tulane offense comparatively to their last 2 opponents has been able to do. But they also have been on a bye this week, this Louisiana team. So they've had a whole, couple weeks to prepare for Tulane. That's a great point. And I think we're not playing the game, so we can say this. But Tulane should take care of business. They are the more talented team. They have more talent on both sides of the football. But you do have to respect what Louisiana's done. They are a top 10 defense. I know they haven't played anybody, Kennesaw State and Grambling State, and those are 2 teams that they should have beaten, just like Tulane should beat Louisiana. But if you don't look at what their defense has done, if you don't look at the fact that they have 3 games of film from Tulane to watch and how teams have beaten them in 2 of those 3 games, and you have 2 weeks to go through that film in order to face Tulane, you would be fooling yourselves. But you would also be fooling yourself if you didn't say Tulane had an opportunity to win this game and win it big, take care of business. Okay. And I think they have an opportunity to do that this week. That's interesting. I don't think it's going to be as big as you think. 3 scores, at least. Okay. Yeah. To me, I think this is still a rivalry game, especially to the Louisiana players, right? I mean, because a lot of these kids are from the state of Louisiana. They played against each other or played with each other in high school. So there is a little bit of bragging rights on the line. And we know how these rivalry games go. I do think Tulane gets the win, but I don't think it's going to be as big as you think it is. But I'm awful at making calls on this show, but 41-17 Tulane. I think they just take care of business. Okay. I think it's donezo. All right. You heard it here from Kyle. If it's 41-17, I want all of you on social media to remind me that I got one right, please. That would be great, because if not, then this is just going to come back to haunt me. I'm here for it, though. Well, we're talking, rivalry games, and sticking with one that we saw last week. I think, both of us, the East Carolina Pirates had been rolling. And let me tell you, these fans were proud. I land in Raleigh, and the amount of purple that I saw inside that Raleigh airport, they were pumped about their 2-0 Pirates. They host App State. The first 30 seconds of that game, the East Carolina offense, man, they were explosive, followed by a monster sack. They looked great early, and then things just seemed to fall apart for them in the second half. Oh, man, it was so tough to watch because they started so fast. They fell so hard, though, at the end of it. In East Carolina, what an atmosphere, what a crowd. They stayed all the way through. We talked about this matchup last week and how much this game means to the people in Carolina, and it showed out. They showed out early. East Carolina, the Pirates did everything they could. They intercepted the flea flicker. Look at the atmosphere rolling in Greenville. I thought it was just tremendous. But Appalachian State, you got to give credit where credit is due. Down 16 points, they said it doesn't matter. We're gonna stick to our game plan.
the play calling, I thought, from the Mountaineers was tremendous. They had great play calling in the end zone. They got their tight ends involved. East Carolina kind of forgot that you have to cover tight ends, especially in the red zone, and that's what came back to bite them. I mean, this play specifically, play action. Look how wide. I mean, I could have caught that touchdown pass. It's unfortunate. But
I think you're giving yourself a lot of credit.
Maybe a little too much credit. But then the next play, 2-point conversion right after this from Appalachian State, and guess what? They find another tight end open. I know that's a replay, but the other play doesn't look that much different from that. So there's ways that the Pirates had chances. They had all sorts of turnovers and opportunities, and they kept App State at bay defensively at times. But the big play comes back to bite them, and then the confidence level just rose for Appalachian State. And by that point, I think the Mountaineers had that one in hand.
Yeah, I think the Pirates secondary, they did some good things, but they gave up some huge explosive plays. It just looked like there was a complete breakdown in the middle of the field a number of times with these big explosive plays that App State was able to put up on them. And so, ultimately, it just came down to an offense in the second half for East Carolina where they just weren't really able to get anything going. For Jake Garcia, the quarterback at East Carolina, it's, you think about what could have been if he didn't throw that interception there with a few minutes left, a rivalry game coming down to the wire on your home field, definitely. But look, again, what a turnaround, though, for East Carolina, what we saw from last year to this year. And they still have to be, Mike Houston has to love what he's seeing from his team this year, regardless of the close loss.
Well, and one of the big things we've talked about with the Pirates on this show previously is their defense. They have a top defense in the American, one of the top probably 3 or 4 units to this point in time. And I know their level of competition is going to get bigger as they go along, and they'll see some more formidable offenses as the conference slate starts to come to fruition, starting this weekend against Liberty, by the way. But I like what I've seen from this defense. And this is a defense that was not very good a year ago. And I like what they've started to build there with the Pirates. And like I talked about, the turnovers were there. They had stops. They gave the offense opportunities to drive down the field and take that game and really put it in their hands. The offense didn't grab it. They didn't grasp onto that opportunity, and that's what ultimately came back to bite them. And it was unfortunate the way that the Pirates finished out that second half and played, because I thought the defense gave them a shot and the offense didn't do that. Now, this week's going to be tough. Liberty's a legitimate opponent on the opposite side. I just talked about how they're one of the contenders in that college football playoff conversation. They were in a New Year's Six bowl game last year. Caden Salter's still the quarterback. He's a Cedar Hill, Dallas, Texas native, so he's just down the road from where we are here in Studio A.
Preseason Offensive Player of the Year in CUSA.
Yeah, legitimate player. This is going to be another test for this defense, probably the best test that they've seen so far.
I think, finishing drives is what you've been hitting on. And if they were able to do that against App State, they would have done that. They would have won that game. And I think that is what this game is going to come down to for them. If that offense can finish drives when they're deep in Liberty's territory. And for Liberty, they have an athletic defensive front. So I'm interested to see the battle in the trenches and how East Carolina is able to stack up and able to protect their quarterback. But one of the really interesting things is Quentin Cooley, talented running back for Liberty. He's questionable right now. When you look at, he suffered a leg injury in week 3. So he's questionable. And for Liberty, they go kind of as he goes. So East Carolina could be getting a little bit of a break there if he is out for this one.
That's the one tough part, is because I don't know if I want Caden Salter to have more in his plate, because he's a good quarterback. He's dual threat, kind of like what we talked about a little bit earlier with Byron Brown and USF. When he's most comfortable is when he's freelancing, and when he's under pressure, rolling out of the pocket. He's able to get outside the tackles and throw on the run. And East Carolina will give opportunities defensively to do that, because they control the front seven. They control in between the hash marks, in between the tackles. They've been so tremendous whenever it comes to the front seven. It's that secondary, when they get stretched, that's where the big play came from against Appalachian State. That's where they've given up some big plays in other games earlier in the year. I don't want Caden Salter with some room to work. And I think if they're not focused on giving the rushing attack and Cooley a legitimate workload, I have a fear that Caden Salter takes this game by the reins, and that's what's going to really challenge this ECU team. It won't. Trust me, Cooley's a great player, and I think he is going to be a key part of their offense, even if he is available in a limited fashion. But Caden Salter, I think from a matchup standpoint, is going to challenge ECU a little bit more. By the way, one of the best uniform matchups in college football this week. I love the Liberty uniforms, and East Carolina might, in my opinion, might be a top
purple?
5 purple gold. That uniform might be a top 5 uniform in the country, just based off a unique look. And I love the helmets. I just love them. They're fantastic. All right, let's go into the Charlotte 49ers. 27-26.
Talk about a comeback.
No doubt. 20-3 late in the game against Gardner Webb, a team that Charlotte, at least going into it, was saying, finally a chance to get back on track. Starting 0-2, not playing exceptionally well in week 1. Played decent, played okay against North Carolina and Chapel Hill. And they go up against Gardner Webb, broken coverages, issues against the passing game. Gardner Webb worked their way down the field with ease in the early going, scoring a touchdown in their second drive. They're lucky it wasn't a touchdown in their first drive. The interceptions, Deshaun Purdy had some rough go of it early. Really, it took everybody at the end. And by everybody, I mean, what a story it's been for Trexler Ivy to see what he's done coming up to this point, and it ended up being probably the story of the week in the American.
Oh, no question. I mean, Trexler Ivy, I've had the opportunity to cover him a multitude of times, and this is a walk-on quarterback. He was the backup last season, and this offense was struggling.
Yeah, they were.
He gets an opportunity week 7 against Navy. And, when you talk to offensive coordinator Mike Miller, the thing he talks about, Trexler Ivy, is he never gets too high or too low. He's a good manager of the game, and that's exactly what you want from a quarterback. And what he was able to do in the fourth quarter against Gardner Webb, right, with his team being down 20-3 late in the third quarter, he connects with Sean Brown in the fourth quarter, who, by the way, another former walk-on, a young man who worked at Chick-fil-A when he was a Division II football player, to just be able to pay for basic necessities. So walk-on to walk-on in that fourth quarter to connect. And listening to those two after the game, I think it's fascinating, right? When you've come through that path as a walk-on and you've gone through that adversity, Trexler Ivy said, it taught me how to respond to moments like that, having your back against the wall.
Chills.
Literally, I think his story is just, it's so great. And I'm really glad to hear Biff Poggi said this week that he will be getting the start this upcoming weekend. And, there was some question whether or not Ivy would be getting the start if Deshaun Purdy was available. To me, it's Trexler Ivy's job until it's not. I mean, what he did for that team in the fourth quarter, it was the second largest comeback in school history, the largest comeback since they've become an FBS team. And for Biff Poggi to go out and say, I've never been a part of something like that before. Think about everywhere this guy is coached for as long as he's been in this profession. It would have been really cool to be on the sideline and experience that type of game. But hats off to Trexler Ivy. He was my performer of the week. To be able to come in off the bench in that moment and show what he showed and lead his team to a 1-point victory. Man, just Trexler Ivy, he gets a big round of applause.
Game ball.
Yeah,
Game
right?
ball from All-American for Trexler Ivy. I mean, he was fantastic. What did you think about Biff Poggi and what he said about Deshaun Purdy, though? Deshaun Purdy is a freshman quarterback with a lot of upside. Lots of upside. True freshman quarterback, but he had some troubles. He had some struggles in the early going, and I think maybe he said it after the game that if Purdy is available, if he is good to go going into week 4, he will be the starting quarterback. Now, that doesn't appear to be the case.
Right. I was stunned.
It's a moot point by this point because it will be Ivy moving forward because of the injury to Purdy. But you said you were stunned by that being the case. Why so?
Well, to me, if you have a quarterback go in and lead your team to a victory in that way when their backs are against the wall, down 20-3, in the third quarter, why would you not let him continue to have that job? Again, I'm not in the walls of the program. I don't see everything that he sees on the day-to-day. But I just think that Trexler Ivy earned it. Yeah. He earned that opportunity. He earned it last year in some moments as well when, he was the starter for the game also against Memphis. And so I think until he's not out there performing to the ability and not commanding the offense like they know he can, ride his arm.
Yeah.
Let him go, because I think he's playing in a different type of confidence. Similar, we saw flashes of it last year, and I talked to him. He said when he is confident, he feels like he's out there playing backyard football, just letting it fly around and
love it,
being a kid again. And so I think we saw that from Trexler Ivy in the fourth quarter on Saturday, no question, and I'm happy to hear it. But regardless if it's Purdy or Ivy, this is Max Brown's job when he gets back, when he's healthy. So, I mean, they recruited him out of Florida. He was at media days. He is the leader of this team. So, to me, Ivy, ride his arm for as long as you can until Max Brown is back and healthy.
I completely agree with you. Could not agree more, because I think Purdy has the upside as a true freshman quarterback. And a lot of times in the day and age of the transfer portal and what you bring to the table from a coaching standpoint is you want these guys to stick around, especially if they are underclassmen like Purdy, who does have the skill set, has some upside, and can still find his way into a starting role later in his career. You don't want to oversell a certain guy, or you don't want to put him in a situation where his confidence can be shot, but you also don't want to take it away by speaking to the media and saying, you know what, Ivy did what he needed to do. We're getting rid of Purdy. Don't worry about it. That's not what Biff Poggi's doing here. And I think at the end of the day, Ivy is just a gamer. Like you said, we're not in the building. We're not in meetings. We're not in practices and different availabilities whenever it comes to the Charlotte 49ers program. Those guys are. They know the background of all of these guys and who's ready to play and who's not. But we see the final product, and Trexler Ivy is a gamer, and he showed it again on Saturday, and it was a big win for Charlotte and what they were able to do.
And now they get to go and face undefeated Indiana, who, by the way, this is an Indiana team that took a whole lot of players from JMU last year. This is basically, JMU 2.0 up there at Indiana. And if you know anything about JMU and what they did last year, then, this is going to be a challenge, no question, for this Charlotte team.
JMU beat Charlotte in week 1, too.
Yeah.
The thing about Charlotte is they haven't played poorly over the last 2 weeks. I know the North Carolina game turned out one way, the Gardner-Webb turned out another way. But they've been outscored in the first half 47-16 through the first 3 games. They have one first half touchdown this year.
They've got to start fast.
You've got to have something against Indiana early on. You cannot afford to be down by multiple scores like they were against Gardner-Webb, like they were against North Carolina, same thing against JMU. You cannot do that against Indiana on the road in Bloomington and have any sort of hope to come back and win that game. So you got to start fast. Indiana's looked really good. They played FIU. They dismantled UCLA last week. I thought that was probably their most impressive win, 42-13 over the Bruins. I know it's a down Bruins program right now, but that's still impressive. But go in there, have some confidence, get off to a quick start, and then see where it leads you from there.
Well, you mentioned FIU, and there was a little fun Shula Bowl history between FAU and FIU, a nice rivalry game down there in South Florida. And the Owls taking care of business, getting it done, a rivalry that goes all the way back to 2002. These schools located just 59 miles apart. We talked earlier about Tulane in Louisiana, these players from the state of Louisiana. I mean, talk about very similar situation here with these kids playing against former teammates in the state of Florida, playing alongside their former teammates. A lot of bragging rights on the line for these FAU Owls.
And you could hear it in the post-game reaction from Florida Atlantic. That team down south, that team down in Miami.
They can't even say the name.
No, it was FIU, FAU, and it was back to normal. Not a conference game like it used to be before Florida Atlantic made the jump into the American, but it still had the same disdain from 59 miles apart. I loved it. FIU came out firing. They were highly efficient early on. They scored on their opening drive. And then the next drive, they kind of handed the game back. They said, you know what? We're going to take this early on. You can have it back, Florida Atlantic. They coughed the ball up at their own 10-yard line. FAU said, thank you very much. And then FAU found the end zone, and they didn't look back from that point forward. Over 37 minutes of time of possession. That's the way you win a football game. And, oh, by the way, Zabari Mosley had 3 touchdowns on the day as well. So Florida Atlantic thoroughly dominated the Shula Bowl, which has some great history behind it. But this was an old-school beatdown by the end of it, and a really nicely played game from the Owls.
Yeah, speaking of the history, let's dive into that
Let's talk about it a little bit,
Kyle. So Owls head coach back in the day, Howard Schellenberger, he was an assistant for legendary Miami coach Don Shula. FIU coach Don Strock was the Dolphins' backup quarterback for 15 years. So definitely pretty cool. Goes back to 2002. Florida Atlantic has the edge, though, in this rivalry game. The 22nd edition. And, the players, they talk about it like it's our Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so cool to hear guys, talk about it. What else did you take away from when you learned about the Shula Bowl?
Well, I've actually been around the Shula Bowl a couple different times just because of these programs and seeing what they've done around. They've been matched up with North Texas. We talked about how that's my alma mater and how they've been around them the last couple of years. But the more you look into it, the more there is some disdain between the two. I mean, the first thing these teams do whenever they win that trophy that has a helmet on both sides, first thing, they sprint over to the trophy and they rip one of the helmets off.
So
Whoever
great.
lost gets their helmet completely annihilated from the side of the trophy. There's no remnants of what that helmet used to be on the trophy in the first place. And, I mean, to this point, it's mostly been Florida Atlantic doing that. They've dominated the series. You said they have the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, if the edge was maybe a buzzsaw, that would be about right.
Right.
I mean, that Florida Atlantic has absolutely dominated the series, just like they've dominated the game. So the fact that they continue to win these games, they've owned it the last decade or so, that's the one thing that sticks out to me. There's a lot of disdain there. But a lot of times you need a rivalry to be two-sided. Right now, it is Florida Atlantic and Florida Atlantic far and away.
Well, we talk about that disdain. They get to carry a little bit of that anger, disdain, and momentum moving forward as they face UConn this week, a UConn offense that struggled against Duke. But as you watched some of the film from that game, what is it that stood out about UConn, and how do you think Florida Atlantic can find an edge over them?
Are we talking basketball or are we talking football? Florida Atlantic, UConn, Duke. It's like a Final Four matchup already. I mean, this was actually pretty much one shot away from this being the national championship game in basketball a couple years ago. Florida Atlantic in the Final Four under Dusty May and company, and then UConn, of course, in their first of back-to-back basketball titles. But on the football field, UConn's been playing good football as of late. You talked about it. The offense didn't necessarily have success against Duke. They led 21-17 going into the fourth, but a late turnover really sunk their chances against the Blue Devils. Don't overlook the Huskies if you're Florida Atlantic, and I don't think they would. I think Florida Atlantic already is hungry, saying that they lost that week open or the season opener against Michigan State. They lost again against Army. I mean, there's multiple opportunities for Florida Atlantic to be 0-3. They took care of business against FIU. You don't want to be 1-3 though. And so going up against UConn, they've churned out some talent. They had a couple guys drafted in each of the last couple drafts. They've had some legitimate NFL talent on both sides of the football. I think that's about the case again. You'll probably see one guy drafted from UConn. I'm blanking on the name right now whenever it comes to the Huskies, but he's an offensive lineman. They've got some guys up front. That defense is what really Florida Atlantic's going to have to try and get by. They've had struggles of scoring their own points, and they're going to struggle to score against the Huskies defense too.
Yeah, they have a pretty good running back. UConn does, Cam Edwards.
Yeah, he's
to
fun.
me, I think he's the X factor in the game. If they stop him, I think the Owls are able to get it done. And just one of the many Week 4 games that we have to look forward to as we're talking FAU and UConn. We have Rice and Army, the Black Knights, back in action after a bye week. And Charlotte, as we've mentioned, goes on the road to Indiana. Utah State will visit Temple. The Temple Owls looking to get their first win. Memphis and Navy, the Memphis Tigers looking to stay undefeated. HCU will visit UTSA, the Roadrunners looking to get things back on track after their loss to Texas last week. East Carolina, as we mentioned, will be facing Liberty. The big one that all eyes are going to be on, number 8 Miami will be visiting South Florida, a game that we have talked lengths about. That one on ESPN, prime time. Definitely don't want to miss it. Florida Atlantic and UConn, Wyoming at North Texas, and finally Tulsa taking on La Tech. La Tech looking to bounce back against Tulsa this week as they dropped one to NC State, the game I was at. But, as we're talking about teams that are looking to get right, Kyle, who of these games on this schedule, who are you keeping an eye on?
Well, I think there are plenty of chances to rebound from a loss in this week, and there's teams like Tulane, UTSA, North Texas, Tulsa. These are all, just to name a few, teams that lost last week that are probably favored going into this week, or should be favored going into it. Got a couple conference games there too, both military academies, Navy and Army, playing in some conference matchups. Navy against Memphis, Army against Rice, and both teams at home. So maybe those will be an interesting matchup to keep an eye on. But there's one team, you talk about getting right. At 1-2, it doesn't look great, but I think this team's a contender to win the American Athletic Conference. Give me the green wave of Tulane rolling their way into my heart, because I really do like the way that they play football on both sides. They're physical, they're mean, they're nasty, they got some speed on the outside. Their boundary receivers are elite. I mean, they're legitimate threats. It reminds me a lot of this ball club that, of course, in 2022 had the Cotton Bowl run. Not the same talent level. I think they have a ways to go to get there, and they don't have the experience of a Michael Pratt or a Tajay Spears to rely on. But Darian Mensah, you take away a couple of those late-game mistakes, this team could be 2-1 or 3-0 with 2 ranked wins. They are really close to really being not only a contender in the conference, but a contender for the college football playoff. And I mentioned that earlier. With 2 losses, it's going to be tough. You're going to need some help, and you have to run the table. But if there's a team that can run the table in the conference outside of Memphis, it's this Tulane Green Wave team. So if you're looking at a 1-2 record, you're down under 500 right now. There's no team that's under 500 that I think has the talent that the Tulane Green Wave have.
I'm not going to deny you. I also agree. I think Tulane is going to get right this week and bounce back with a win. But I think a team that just needs to get right overall and sort of wipe the slate clean, move forward, is UTSA, the Roadrunners. I think they have an opportunity. You know, they're coming off of just a beatdown last week against Texas, 56-7. Before the season even started, I said Texas was going to win the national championship. And for Jeff Traylor, he goes on record.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Maybe not to you, but I have said it. I have put it out there publicly. Texas is my pick to win the national title this year. So
sounds like a bet later in the year.
We'll see if I was a betting woman. But I Jeff Traylor, after the post game, you listen to it, he says, and it was exactly how I felt watching that game, we were simply outmatched. I mean, sometimes you're just going to go up against talent.
Part of it.
Size, skill, speed, right? I mean, just a whole different level of athletes they were playing against. But what he did say, too, was, I'm proud of how hard my team played. They were able to fix a lot of things, cutting down on penalties. They were more disciplined, and they were more in command in their offense despite the score. I mean, they only put up 7 points, but he talked about what he saw from Owen McCown and his quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think as they get into conference play, too, they are going to have some opportunities to really silence this noise, especially, back-to-back weeks playing teams in your state, rivalry games, if you will, Texas State and Texas. They're going to look to rebound with an FCS opponent this week. And Houston Christian, I think this is their get-right week before they go into conference play. This is a team that is a total work in progress. So I think the UTSA team we're seeing right now in week 4 is not the same UTSA team that we're going to see when everything's said and done here, week 12, week 13, later on in this season. And having a coach like Jeff Traylor, there's no doubt in my mind that they are going to get right, and it's just a matter of time before they do.
And I have about as much respect for Jeff Traylor as any other coach in the country. Forget the conference. In the country, I think he's a legitimate top-notch head coach in college football. And he's proven that throughout the last couple of years. I mean, 11-3 last year. They were 12-2 the year before. They've gone to 4 straight bowl games. 9-4 last year. Excuse me. They were 11-3 in 2022. But they are 0-3 in terms of looking good this year. They didn't look good in the opener against Kennesaw State. They couldn't run the ball. They get blasted by Texas State on the road against a team they probably should have beaten, if I'm being completely honest, from a talent level standpoint, and a team that they directly compete against whenever it comes to recruiting. They get blown out by 39 points. And then, of course, Texas, you're going to be outmatched. But 56-7 is an absolute beatdown. Houston Christians get right. The one game that I'm looking for early on is East Carolina, because East Carolina's defense,
that could tell us a lot.
It's the conference opener for UTSA. You're going to learn a lot about this Roadrunner bunch and what they're made of, because they'll be 2-2. They'll have the win against Houston Christian, hopefully, knock on wood, for the Roadrunners going into it, as long as they take care of business. And then you go up against East Carolina, who we've already talked about has one of the better defenses in the American Athletic Conference. They're really good against the run. Can McCown, can Traylor, can this offense figure out some level of rhythm, and Justin Burke, the offensive coordinator in his second year, there's a lot of pressure on the Roadrunners because that fan base is hungry for wins. They're continuing to try and work their way into that same conversation that Memphis and Tulane and USF and all these other teams on a national spotlight in the American these last couple of years have been. UTSA has the talent to do so. They haven't shown it in 2024, and I expect that to turn around at some point in the moment. They've got a game later in the year, too. If they continue rolling, so they've got East Carolina, then a bye week. That's a much-needed bye week. Then Rice. What was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
UTSA. Yeah. Rice, at Florida Atlantic, Tulsa. All of those are winnable games. But you keep going down the schedule. Memphis is going to be a tough one. North Texas is a rivalry game on a Friday night. That'll be tough in its own right. But then Temple and Army.
Yeah, that's one to circle.
Let me talk about this Army team real quick. They were coming off a bye week. They've beaten 2 good teams already. Morgan, if you look at their schedule, there's a chance they can make a run here at this conference championship game.
I mean, there's a real good chance that they're going to go undefeated in conference play.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think I don't know what else to say other than Army in year one, welcome to the American. I really do think, because of course, not even on this schedule, the last game of the season is Navy, but that's not a conference game because that game will be played after the American Athletic Conference Championship.
Yeah.
So there is no meaning in terms of conference standings or even, college football playoff potential talk for that Navy game. There's no real weight, on that because all the rankings and everything will be done
by that point
in the season. So I do like Army's chances. I would have, if we were sitting there at Media Day looking at, our top 2 to 3 teams that we thought would be playing in the conference championship, Army, I'm sorry, they weren't on my list, but they have proven through what we've seen from them so far these first 2 weeks, they look good. They look real good.
And they have the benefit of avoiding some of the top teams in the conference.
Yeah, that's...
now you've got a game against Air Force later on. You've got a game against Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium. That'll be a fun one to watch. I mean, you've got chances to make statements. I think the toughest conference matchup they have is either UTSA or East Carolina at this point in time because Rice, Tulsa, UAB, we just looked at their schedule. They avoid Tulane. They avoid Memphis.
Florida.
They avoid South Florida. All these teams that we're talking about that are at least through non-conference play and the non-conference slate as legitimate contenders in the conference, they avoid most of those teams. So if they stay healthy, they continue to get better. Their toughest matchups are later in the year, and a lot of those you get at home. UTSA's at home. East Carolina's at home. They could run the table, and it would not be shocking to see Army at least in the conversation for that conference championship game before they even play Navy going into that. That is wild to think about because they're going to play Notre Dame on November 23rd. They play UTSA at home November 30th. Then they turn around the conference title games on December 7th. Then you have December 14th where they play Navy. What a weird thought process around all of this whenever it comes to the college football playoff and what could be a possible Army team that's contending to be there.
Yeah, and for all these teams, too, in the American, right? I mean, they've been used to playing a team like Navy where you have to play and prepare for the triple option. But now for some of these teams, you're not just preparing one time a season. You have to prepare twice. times. So I don't know if that's maybe a benefit because you've seen it maybe more. But at the same time, they are a challenge. And any team going up against them, I think the way that they have run their offense, it has been awesome to see, right? New offensive coordinator and Bryson Daly and just how much he's matured and grown and been able to really command the offense and his decision making of what we've seen from him. I really do think Army has a real shot of winning this conference in year one.
Yeah, they really do. And there's a couple teams that have a chance, and we alluded to this earlier, but we've talked to Mario Anderson on this show. We've talked to some of the Memphis possibilities and Memphis experts in this show, but it's time to take a look at somebody who had another great week for the Memphis Tigers.
Play action. Henigan. End zone. Touchdown. Play action fake works to perfection. And Anthony Landfear with his 5th career touchdown reception.
And make it 40-plus games now for Seth Henigan and counting with a passing touchdown as one of the best quarterbacks in the American Athletic Conference. Goes 25 of 38 for 208 172 yards, a couple scores against the Florida State Seminoles on the road to get the win. Seth Henigan joins us now here on All-American. Seth, first off, congratulations on the win. I mean, what was it like going into Doak Stadium, getting the win and getting this Memphis team back in the national spotlight where it deserves?
Yeah, I appreciate you for congratulating me, but it was a great game, great opportunity for our program to go into a hostile environment and come out with a win. So just to be able to do that and execute and play well in all three phases, there's obviously some things to clean up, but all in all, we're just happy to come out of there with a win.
Now, as you can see behind you with the trophy case full of different awards throughout the years, Memphis is not new to winning, but they are 3-0 this season. What's it been like starting the year the way that you guys have, and how it does set you up to ultimately achieve the goals that you have in front of you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important to start fast to the year, and it's good to be 3-0 at this point in the season. But at the end of the day, all of our goals are still in front of us, and all three of the games that we've already played have no bearing on the ultimate goal that we have, which is to win our conference. So with conference play starting this week, our blinders are on, and our whole entire team is excited for the opportunity to play Navy and to go into Annapolis and play a conference opponent.
Seth, no one's been harder or more critical of themselves after all these 3 games than you. And that's a sign, right, of a great player, a great quarterback and competitor. I'm curious from your perspective, when you go back and watch the film of what you've seen from yourself these past 3 weeks, what is it that you've really honed in on as you go into conference play where, as you said, the goals really now you have the opportunities to go out and win a conference title?
At the end of the day, it's all about winning football games for me. It doesn't matter if I have 200 yards, if our running backs have rushed for 300 yards, if our defense stops the other team and holds them to 0 points and we only have 3 points and a field goal. However we can win the football game, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. So, I mean, there's definitely things I need to improve on. And, I feel like last week was my best game thus far during the season. So just got to continue stacking days and stacking weeks and put it on display really and give my playmakers the ball, and we'll be all right.
Yeah, speaking of playmakers, your defense this week really showed out and set the tone early in that Florida State game. What was it like from your perspective on the sideline, watching that early takeaway? You talked about the pad popping, how you could hear it from where you were. What was your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we deferred the opening kickoff, so they got the ball first, and I think it was just like the second play of the game. They handed off a little mid zone out of pistol, and all of a sudden I just heard our sideline kind of explode, and we got a turnover, their opening possession. So we were immediately given the ball back and able to put points on the board. So just to be able to come out fast and be able to have a good start against a good opponent, that was definitely really important. And our defense, I mean, I can't say enough about them. Just the way they played thus far through 3 games, it's been really impressive to see our staff and our players come together and execute at a high level. So just got to continue doing that going into conference.
No doubt about it. And they've allowed just 29 points through the first 3 games against quality opponents at that. And I know you're happy not having to go up against them in the real game. You've got a red jersey on. You get protected whenever you're going up against them. But what's the biggest challenge when facing this Memphis defense in practice and just based off of what you've seen, based off of how they're built?
Yeah, I mean, just the scheme. I feel like Coach Hankins does a great job mixing up coverages, mixing up the front, and just we have some great players. We have some talented guys on our team on both sides of the ball, and they put the work in every single day and night, constantly working, constantly up at the facility in order to be successful. So it's just a product of the work that they put in over and over for days and weeks on end. So I'm really proud of our defense and the way that they played, and we just got to continue going.
Tell me about some of those goals that we talked about earlier. Of course, the college football playoff is something that is on the mind of everybody when they win one of these conferences like the American, but it's much more than just that. It's a week-by-week thing whenever it comes to you guys. So how do you keep that compartmentalized whenever you're preparing for a team like Navy, getting into a big week of football, coming off of a big win against Florida State?
Yeah, in our team meeting this morning, Coach Silverfield showed us a message that he got sent from Calvin Austin, one of my former teammates and currently a receiver on the Steelers. He was just talking about his experience in my freshman year. We were 3-0 as well, just coming off a win against Mississippi State, and we lost to UTSA.
Yeah.
And he just said basically to keep our mindset at practice at a high level and work at a high level throughout the week in order to prepare for this game, because it's extremely important just to continue on the track that we've set for ourselves thus far through three games. So, I mean, just taking it day by day, week by week. We never really talk about the college football playoff.
Yeah.
We just talk about a conference championship, because everything aligns with winning your conference, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of the leaders of our team. So I think we have the right mindset and right approach. So just, taking it week by week and knowing to, live where your feet are, be where your feet are, and have those blinders on whoever the opponent may be.
Now, Seth, one of the things that you really talked about heading into that Florida State game was the culture being the difference maker in what ultimately would lead to success. Take me inside that Memphis locker room. What is the inside meaning or inside culture that you have created there, amongst the other leaders on the team? Being there, it's such a rarity, 4 years of a college quarterback at the same place, and to have that continuity. Give us a sense of the Memphis culture.
Yeah, I did say that our culture would be the difference, and I think that it was. And basically, I think it comes down to this, and that's having people who have been together stay together. Having Coach Cramsey, Coach Silverfield, myself back. Coach Hankins has been here all 4 of my years here. Chandler Martin came back, Rock Taylor, Demir Blankensee, Lanphier, Xavier Hill. I mean, the list goes on and on. And then just being an experienced team, an old group, and we played a lot of football together. So the culture starts from the top, starts with Coach Silverfield and our staff and our coordinators, and then it comes down to the guys that they've influenced and been able to influence for years on end. So we're basically miniature versions of them to a certain sense, which is a good and bad thing. More of a good thing than a bad thing. But I love being a mini Coach Cramsey because he's very knowledgeable, and I'm happy and proud to say that. So it just comes down to having guys who have been together for a long time and have the right mindset and right state of mind, and then pushing guys that need to be pushed. And we have 20 leaders on the team. And we have plenty of guys who have the right mindset and mentality and are willing to push guys. So that's really important for a team to continue getting better as the season progresses.
And you can see that in the production with the team and the wins and the 3-0 start to the year. But with all of that around you, and you've been a constant in that whole equation at the same time, how has that helped you grow from year one now into the latter parts of your collegiate career? Because you were a coach's kid at Denton Ryan and in Denton, Texas. You were able to learn from him, but then having that continuity and that coaching staff around you has helped you take another step. How has that helped you grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about the talent, and good people make good football players. That's something Coach Cramsey says pretty often. But when you have talented players around you, that definitely helps you be more successful. And so just to have great players such as Rock and Demir and Kobe Drake and Lanphier and Sutton Smith, all those guys around me, and they're also good people. I mean, that's just the best combination, having people who are hard workers but also really talented at football. And that helps your team push forward and continue to have the right mindset. So I'm just blessed that those guys chose to come to Memphis or stay in Memphis. However they got here, they're here, and we're happy they're on our side and on our team, regardless of how they got here. And we're having people produce that are transfers that have, been in the program a long time. It doesn't matter how you got here. It matters your mindset when you're here. So we're really proud of our guys and how they've performed thus far through 3 weeks, but we have more work to do.
One of those transfers, we had your teammate on last week, Mario Anderson. He told us about how he cuts people's hair. Have you let him touch your hair?
I'm not let him touch my hair.
Wait, is that a conscious decision, or is that just you got to build that trust with your barber? I mean, I get it. I understand it. It's a thing. Why not?
Mario does a great job cutting hair, but I'm not going to cut my hair for a while. I just haven't cut it since beginning of fall camp. I had a little mullet. Oh no, just letting it flow.
You're just
All
letting the
right.
mullet flow then.
The superstitious kicking in a little bit, or
No,
no?
I'm not
Just
superstitious.
okay,
I used
just
to
for
be
the
in
look.
school, but we wear so many different uniform combinations. We do so many different things that the superstition has gone out of my body. So,
How long is your hair right now? Like, is this
oh,
the longest it's ever been?
no, I used to have like, what I'm saying? Like,
You had the Gardner Minshew.
yeah, there you go.
You get a little bit further down there. Okay, I see it. So by the time conference championship week, we talk about postseason stuff, bowl games, we're going to be
We're not even going to recognize you.
Yeah, you're going to be rocking the locks, right?
It is possible. I guess
Well, Seth, thank you so much for taking some time. Good luck the rest of the way. Congratulations on the success, not only so far here in 2024, but throughout your career with the Memphis Tigers. We look forward to talking with you again down the line.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate your time.
What a job by Seth Henigan, talking about the haircuts, talking about the win over the Seminoles of Florida State, and, of course, maybe some college football playoff. He really didn't want to hit it there. He didn't want to talk about the future, but he said our goals are right in front of us, and I think that's the biggest thing for Memphis right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they know a conference championship, that is the segue into this new 12-team playoff. And, I love we were able to bring out his personality a little bit at the end there with the haircut. But, really just all ball, so focused, so serious, even keel, and I guess he gets that from Dad Dave, who we talked about, of course, in that interview.
He's just all business. He really is, and that's what makes him a great quarterback and a great leader for that Memphis Tigers bunch. I mean, the Tigers and the Seminoles, two great mascots as well. And since we had some serious football talk here, I want to talk about the American mascots.
All right,
how well do you know your mascot trivia? So I've got a couple questions for you. You've got a couple questions for me. We have not talked over this at all. So this could be embarrassing. We'll figure it out along the way.
And fans at home, guess along with us, too. Yeah,
absolutely. See. Question number 1. I'll start things off for you, Morgan Uber. Which one of these schools does not have a live mascot? Temple, Army, Navy, or Rice?
Rice. The Rice Owls.
Wow.
D.
Okay, the Rice Owls. D, you are exactly right.
Woohoo.
Bonus, do you know the names of the live mascots for the other schools?
Okay, so Temple is Stella.
Okay.
Army, I know their actual mascot is Blackjack, but I don't think that's their actual name. So no, I don't know Army's.
Okay.
Navy's Bill.
Yep, Bill the Goat.
Yeah, and then Rice obviously
doesn't have one.
So Army.
You're exactly right. Temple is Stella the Great Horned Owl. Lives at the Elmwood Park Zoo in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Love that. I think that's fantastic. The Navy mascot is, of course, for the United States Naval Academy, Bill the Goat. Live goat that first appeared back in 1893. But then Army has 3 mules.
Oh, the mules.
How cool is that?
Okay, the mules. That's right.
Ranger the Third, Striker, and I'm going to just absolutely trounce this name. Paladin, maybe?
Okay.
Paladin? I'm sorry,
we'll have
Army.
Army fans weigh in.
Paladin is what I'm being told from the back. Paladin is the name. Apologies, but the tradition began as a response by West Point when the Naval Academy adopted the goat as the mascot. So the mules served as the Army for generations and hauling gear for soldiers and things of the sort.
Yeah.
It is so cool how
it.
some of these came to life.
Okay, my turn. What bird mascot is seen right here from 1984? Who's that?
My gosh. Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh. That looks like none of our mascots
that is
these days.
Terrifying. My first thought, we were talking about Southern Miss earlier, but they're not in the American. 1984?
1984, who you got?
There's the only guess I've got, and this is by far a guess. That looks like a Roadrunner to me. Is it?
Ding, ding, ding.
Is it really?
Yeah,
Is it Rowdy the Roadrunner? Wow.
UTSA's mascot. There he is, warming up in the crowd during a men's basketball game against St. Mary's.
I'm shocked. I am absolutely shocked that I got that one right. Don't get used to it, American fans. It's not happening.
That's pretty impressive. We're 2 for 2.
2 for 2. Nicely done. Can you name the 3 owls in the conference?
Like their actual names or the schools?
The names: Temple, Rice, and Florida Atlantic. Do you know the names?
So Temple, Stella.
Okay.
Or
the
actual
mascot
name. Oh. No. Well, so I know it's obviously Rice, Florida Atlantic, and Temple. but I cannot tell you any of their names.
You're done. You have a guess for any of them?
Um,
You should know Florida Atlantic.
Really?
Yeah, that's a classic one. He's on the logo.
I'm stumped. I have no idea.
Alzy.
Oh, okay.
Alzy is the Florida Atlantic one.
I guess I could have guessed.
Rice. Do you have any guess for Rice whatsoever? Sammy is the owl for
How do you
Rice.
get that?
I'm not going to pretend to know.
We'll ask our friend Taylor McCall.
Yeah. Temple. There's a restaurant that's kind of like it out there somewhere.
Give me what kind of food?
I don't want to give them any sponsorship. They're not a free sponsor. The name is Hooter for Temple.
Okay.
Hooter
Got
the
it,
owl.
got it. Fair.
So there you go. So we're 2 for 3 at this
Okay.
point along the
Well,
way.
I got the schools right.
Yeah.
So all right, there we go. How about question 4? What conference mascot was originally named Petey before dropping after only 2 years?
I know this one because of there were a couple games I filled in for ECU men's basketball last year. It is Petey the Pirate. ECU men's basketball helps me out with this one, but that is ECU, East Carolina.
You are correct. So the name Petey was believed to come from the Petey rivers that flow through North and South Carolina.
Okay, I didn't know that as a background. That's outstanding.
Yep, so
I like that.
The more you know.
All right, last one. Who's older, Scrappy the Eagle or Riptide the Pelican? Scrappy from North Texas, and of course Riptide is
I feel like this is like
Tulane.
a stump. I wish I could phone a friend on this one because I have a feeling there's some people around here, maybe someone in our control room as well, that would have an idea. North Texas alum. I'm literally taking a wild guess. I'm going to guess Scrappy the Eagle.
Ding, 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 ding.
Okay.
Well done,
All right.
Scrappy. 1971, the Scrappy Eagle was named, and it used to be Epi. Back in the day, in North Texas.
They've gone from Epi to Scrappy?
Here's a fun fact around North Texas athletics. In their athletic department lobby back when I was in school, they had the Epi Eagle costume in there, and it was like encased in a glass showcase there. They had it there forever until it started smelling. The actual costume started smelling so bad in the athletic department that they had to move it to a different spot. And I don't know where it's at now.
I feel
it's somewhere
bad for the
along
person
line.
that had to wear that.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have to. It was just on show. It was just showcased. It was good. Yeah. It was all back in the day. But it was there for a little bit, and they've made fun of that. So it's gone now.
Okay. So now we got the mascot trivia out of the way. But if you had to put your favorite mascot in the league out there, who's your number one? Who's the number one in your heart?
Listen, this is not just a show for football. So my favorite mascot is none other than Wichita State's mascot, Woo-Shock. What a cool name for a mascot, and what a bomb mascot it is. I mean, look at Woo-Shock. I mean, the energy just flows from his face, right? That's an incredible mascot.
At our basketball championships every year, the Shocker is by far the most fun mascot. Photo bombing every single video we do. I mean, just all over the place. So props to you. I would have. You went outside the realm there.
I did. I just wanted to surprise you a little bit there. But Woo-Shock, I mean, he is the logo. Yeah. He is the logo of Wichita State and the Shockers. The Shockers is a cool nickname anyways. But Woo-Shock, I mean, big, bad, muscle-bound bundle of weed is what he's defined as.
It's a bundle of weed. How intimidating, right?
He's been their mascot since 1948, a friend to every Shocker fan, and, of course, those around the league like the American. Who's your favorite?
So I guess I'm a sucker for the live animals. I'm glad that we had one of those questions included. Bill the Goat. I think it's so cool. I love history and tradition of college athletics. And so you think back to how old goats in the Navy, 1700s, when Navy sailors were bringing goats on ships, and they originally brought them for food, right?
Yeah.
I mean, pretty useful source, but now they just bring them as companions on the ship. So a good old goat. But I guess,
old goat.
Yeah, I think they're on bill number 36 too.
Wow.
So pretty cool. I think, I like the history and tradition. And of course it was, I think you mentioned it, right? In 1983, Navy brought a live goat, and that was their win over Army. So also a good luck charm. So who would have thought goats and good luck?
Who wins a battle? Is it the big bad bundle of weed or Bill the Goat? I mean, don't goats eat grass?
So I think, I'm sorry. My mascot would definitely be eating.
That's unfortunate.
Eating your mascot. Well, Kyle, let's take a look at the top 5 plays from around the conference, from mascots to the big plays. We start with South Florida at Southern Miss. Doug Blue Eli, the 315-pound big man, makes a big-time interception. A tip ball, and he gets just underneath it, like hands of a receiver with that ball control.
I love it. Big men scoring touchdowns, big men laying out and making an interception. This is an athlete. That is pure athleticism to be able to get under the football like that, extend out, and keep that ball off the turf. Good job, Doug Blue Eli. Also, great name.
Right?
Great
Yeah,
name.
such a good name. We'll have more from this game later. Let's head to number 4.
Number 4, let's go to the soccer pitch. Sam Moxie outside the box for East Carolina. Left foot, absolute rocket into the upper 90 and behind the goalie who had a hand on it. It doesn't matter. She put a little extra moxie behind this one, and it caroms off the glove and into the back of the net.
Well, Pirates, they're stealthy. They're stealers, and she steals one and gets one there in the back of the net and ends up defeating Temple 2-1 in that one.
Yeah, Petey the Pirate would have loved number 4 on our top plays.
And to number 3 we go. We got more from the Bulls in Hattiesburg, but the offense getting the glory this time. Byron Brown to the back corner of the end zone for Joshua Hardiman. He makes this one-handed grab. Number 1 reels it in. We should probably check those gloves for some magnets.
And you got the storm clouds in the background as he makes the grab. And, I mean, he was thundering down the field. Took over some of that contact. Maybe an and one there, too. I really liked it. Well done from South Florida. All right, North Florida. Florida Atlantic set piece in the 12th minute. UNF playing down to 10 men. They didn't have that extra guy they needed because this one bounds around the box. Mamadou Diarra bicycles this one home. This one was ridiculous. The bicycle off of the crosser, off of the corner kick, and, of course, his second goal of the season is an absolute beaut. This landed at number 6 on SportsCenter this past week, but it's number 2 in our top 5.
And goes for a spin. Look at that. Some style points, man. That's as impressive as all get out. And if that's at number 2, man, number 1, this has got to be good. Our top play of the week comes from the comeback of the year. Well, so far. Anyway, backup quarterback Trexler Ivy to the former walk-on Sean Brown. The walk-on to walk-on with the defender draped all over him.
I mentioned it and one a minute ago, then and one again here. This one, actually, the flag is thrown. Doesn't matter. They needed the comeback, and they got it. And we talked about the story and the background behind this. It adds a little extra juice to a play like that.
Yeah, when things are tough, Brown says, watch me, hauling in the 28-yard pass for a TD and 21 points in the fourth quarter for Charlotte to go on to win by 1.
We had some good top plays this week.
Yeah, we did. It's
Bicycle kicks, comebacks, storm clouds. I mean, all sorts of different things.
I always love at the end of the year when we get to power rank then the top 10 plays of the entire academic year. So that's going to be the real challenge.
That's one reason to subscribe to the American Athletic Conference, right? Subscribe to All-American as you can.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Well, another great week of being here next to you, Kyle, and our great crew, Matt Sizek, Zach Fisher, back in the control room, creating some great content for us to chat about. Great producers, editors back there, and enjoy your college football Saturday. Where are you going to be this weekend?
I'm going to be calling North Texas and Wyoming for the Mean Green Sports Network.
All
so
right.
I'll be up in Denton calling some radio broadcasts. Excited about that one and getting back in the football swing of things from a play-by-play standpoint. So it'll be fun.
Well, hopefully your Mean Green can get right this week as well.
That'll be good.
And we'll see all of you back here next Wednesday for another episode of All American.